It was hard. Like, I was in my early 30s, being a woman of color. I would walk into meetings with CEOs and GMs of some of the largest event companies in the country. And I can't even tell you how many times people would ask me to go make a coffee thinking I was someone's assistant. It was hard. It was really, really hard. And I was really lucky that well, not lucky. I think it was a attraction of the right people, but I had really good people around me who would just go, no, if you want someone to make a decision, she's not going to make you a coffee, but she's going to tell you what she wants, and we're not going to do it otherwise.
I'm your host, Tiffany Gleland, an Australian business and mindset coach with 10 years experience in online marketing and the creator of the Business Bravery framework. I help coaches like you to be brave so you can stop dreaming and start doing that next big brave step and finally make more impact and get more clients. From speaking on camera to selling to launching, my approach to bravery helps you take bigger leaps without the mindset spirals. It's the secret ingredient to bigger results. In this episode, I had the pleasure of chatting with Caroline Brunne, who is a survivor coach, author, professional speaker, and entrepreneur. From her lived experience of childhood sexual abuse and incest, Caroline has shifted her trauma into transformation. Caroline shares how she has begun her healing journey and has actively guided both survivors and supporters by teaching them the power of being allies whilst walking beside survivors as they face the complexities within their journey of healing. She is paving the way for survivors to remove the shame that has silenced them by owning their voices and knowing that they are so much more than what has happened to them. With that said, this is an amazing episode, and I can't wait to share with you Caroline's stories of business bravery, past, present, and future. Now, who's ready for some business bravery inspiration? Let's dive in. Okay, guys, I am very excited to be here with the amazing Caroline Brunne and to discuss all of the amazing brave things that she has going on. I won't put words into her mouth. I will let her tell us. Obviously, you've heard the intro and the bio already, but yeah, Caroline, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I genuinely appreciate it. I'm very excited to, get into everything that you've got going on. I discovered you a few weeks ago, and it was right at a time when I was dealing with some of my own trauma and things like that from my past. And yeah, it was just felt like the absolute right lineup of things. And so I really appreciate getting to be able to talk to you and to inspire others with everything you've got going on.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Please, yeah, let me know what you tell us about you and your business and the brave things that you have going on in your business at the moment.
Oh, about me and my business. So I've worn many, many hats for many, many years. I have been in business for a long time. I guess a long time considering, how old I am and what I'm doing and that sort of thing. So I've been in business in one way or another, or worked for myself, or not kind of had a boss as such, for I would say close to 12 years now. So that's a long time. And in that 12-year period, there's been 3 different businesses in that. So the current one, another one that's still existing. So I do have a whole nother business, which we might talk about today. And then previous to that, I was in a partnership. So I was brought on as a partner after a business had already started. And that was my first taste of being in business. I think even when I say all of that and I talk about that, I think all of that is really brave. There's a real glamorizing of being your own boss and having a business. And I don't know, I think sometimes people think we're just like out on our yacht in the middle of the day drinking champagne. We're not. We're trying to pay the bills. And it's really brave to be it start a new business where you decide that you're going to take a skill that you have and turn it into something that makes you money, but in a way that is different to doing it as a job. Because there's a whole other set of things that you have to learn how to do as a business owner. So I guess I just really I love. I'm going to be honest. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the word brave. It's very complex, and I'll talk to you about that, as we talk more about bravery. But I really wanted to acknowledge that even though I've been in business now for, as I said, about 12 years, that in itself requires some bravery. I think the other part of my story that's really important to share, and the work that I'm doing at the moment, over the last 3 to 4 years, I have been publicly speaking about my lived experience as a trauma survivor. I have a range of complexities to what that trauma looks like as a survivor of incest, child sexual abuse, family and domestic violence. And how I have chosen to bring that into the work that I do is, in the last kind of 12 to 18 months, I've stepped into the space of being a life coach, specifically working as a trauma survivor coach and working with trauma survivors in that space. And then most recently, I have added breathwork to my suite of skills, which I don't even think I've announced very publicly. It's very much just about to be a thing that is something people can book with me. Um, so I've been doing my training for that. And yeah, I think the part that makes all of that work really brave is that in showing up and supporting others in this space, I confront my own lived experience every day in a way that, as a trauma survivor, we carry our experiences with us anyway, but I then put my experiences on the front line and share them in a way to create space for others to be able to work with me or to hear my story. And you've already shared that in me sharing my story, that's how we ended up here today. So, that's why I do what I do.
Yes, definitely. I came across your work at a time where it was just really powerful for me. I mean, it still is, obviously, like you said, trauma survivors carry their trauma around with them, and definitely that certainly resonates with my experience and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was really powerful to come across someone, like, from my perspective, who, has not only lived it, but you're talking about it and just had, a different approach to it. Or yeah, rather than, the feeling like you need to, or like I need to push it under the rug or something like that. So yeah, just the work you do is so powerful, and I genuinely appreciate it. And yeah, just love what you do.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's hard to talk about this stuff because obviously there's personal, like, normally when I'm talking to guests, it's like, oh, we talk about business, and it's just, like, it can get deep, but not on some of the, like, touching on those, like, trauma wounds of my own, of just, yeah. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
it is like that in itself is the really tricky part. And I have days where I go, what on earth are you doing? Like, why would you pick the worst things in your life to then turn into a business? Like, that was not a good idea. And they are not my great days. They're normally the days where I'm like, okay, let's take an extra hour in bed and let's maybe go for a walk and move some stuff around in my calendar, because the reality is, as I said, I've been in business a really long time. I have been able to use so many of my skills and opportunities to do amazing things. And I've lived many, many lives in a lifetime already. And I'm so proud of the work that I've done. But that stuff is fun. Like, I get to use my skills and I get to show up and talk endlessly about whatever the topic is. And I'm now talking endlessly about this topic that is, like, grating on the inside sometimes. And it requires a lot of self-care and practices to maintain my my ongoing healing, because that's the other part of it. It's not linear. It kind of comes in, like, in ebbs and flows. But yeah, I appreciate the fact that even though this is a topic that is also raw for you, that in creating spaces like this, we know that someone will be listening to this and will gain something from hearing two
Mm.
people put their bravery forward and carry their trauma with them while they chat.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, even for, people, like other coaches who might be listening, who, I mean, like, I think so many people get into coaching because they had something that they had to contend with, and they want to help others with similar experiences in some way or another. It may not go as deep on the trauma side, and, many of us are not, like, trauma informed coaches and things like that. However, yeah, I just think there's definitely resonance in that experience for everyone, even. So,
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really good point, especially as coaches, as people that work in kind of a service forward facing type of business. We often start our businesses, we often do the work that we do because we needed something that we couldn't find, or we found something but it wasn't the right fit for us, because there's a lot of other stuff out there and there are so many coaches out there, but we couldn't really see what we thought we needed or people needed in the market. And that's a really important thing to acknowledge with coaches and service providers, is why are you doing what you're doing? And at the same time of doing what you're doing, are you doing your own work, right? Because if you came to this because you were trying to fill something for yourself, have you just distracted yourself because now you're just you're helping others and you're supporting others, but are you continuing to find the things that you need? And that was, I guess, one of the biggest parts for me that was really important as I entered this space. I have had people request me as a life coach for probably close to about 5 or 6 years because of the other type of work that I've done. And I've always kind of brushed it off. Like, I've done a little bit of coaching as such in different areas and probably done similar work without the title because I wasn't comfortable with the title. But what I found was I knew I needed to be in a really specific place and have mechanisms in place to continue to do my own work and continue having my own foundations in place before I could step into a space where I was holding space for others. It was important to me that there wasn't going to be a transference of my stuff to other people, and also having my own boundaries in place. So though I'm holding space for clients, and the clients that often find me are like, one, they're trauma survivors, it's in the title, and two, they're often trauma survivors that are like me, so they have experiences that are similar to mine. So having boundaries in place to be able to hold space for people whilst also not carrying their stuff with me all day. They're all skills that coaches in theory should know how to do if you're stepping into this work. That's a really
yeah.
big part of it, but it's something we forget to check in with and to check how we are managing that transference, that energy, that, and how it's impacting us, and what support mechanisms we have in place, who our coaches are, who our support mechanisms are.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's such a really great point. And just thinking about definitely times like for me, I came into sort of my coaching work from an expertise in marketing and sort of marketing consulting slash coaching. And definitely in the beginning, I did not have the skills of perhaps separating myself from my clients and having those boundaries. Like that was something that I had to learn the hard way in a lot of cases. So yeah, and I can't even imagine with the trauma side, like I can see, like, excuse me, how completely necessary that is. So, wow, yeah. So, you said earlier that you have a love-hate relationship with the term bravery, and
Let's
I'd
unpack
love,
that.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely, caught my attention. Would you be interested in going into that? And yeah, like
Yeah.
I'd love perspective on that. So,
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple of elements to that. So the first is
mm,
one that most trauma survivors, or ones that like share their story, would have heard many, many times. I don't want to be brave. Like, people tell me I'm brave all the time and that I'm inspirational or that I'm whatever. And to anyone that's listening who has said that to me, please know that I'm okay. Like, you haven't offended me. And to anyone that potentially says it
mm,
to me in the future, it's fine. Like, I understand what you're trying to say and where that's coming from. My frustration is an internal one, because it's like, I didn't decide that I wanted to climb Everest. So I was going to train and then like do other climbs and then eventually work my way up to climbing Everest. That would be a choice, and that would be like consciously setting out a plan and putting mechanisms in place and getting a support team and all that sort of stuff. I didn't choose this life. I was subjected to it. And so when people tell me that they think I'm brave, it, like, I understand why, because I'm still standing upright and I'm doing things that are supporting other people, and I'm trying to turn my story into an example of how we could do it differently, or sharing it in a way that we can learn and hopefully do it differently, and those sorts of things. So I understand the premise of people saying you're so brave, but internally I almost, not that I don't feel like I deserve the title, because I understand why it's there, but it's not of choice. And that's part one of my part one of how I feel about bravery. But the second part, and I think this is the part that everyone will be able to resonate with, is you cannot experience bravery without being absolutely terrified. Like, it is like you're standing on the edge of something and you have to feel overwhelmed, terrified, ashamed, whatever the emotions are. There's often more than one. You have to be in that, be it for a split second or sometimes for decades,
Mm.
to choose to step into your bravery. And I think when when we hear the word bravery, we it's like when we hear that concept of an overnight success. There's no such thing, right? Like, no one just did the thing overnight. Like, famous people didn't become famous overnight. They probably worked a really long time to
Mm.
craft their
Yeah.
skills as a musician or an actor or whatever it is.
Mm.
And it's the
Yeah.
same. Like, I didn't become brave overnight and start talking on stages about my lived experience. I spent decades in fear and shame and a range of other really complex emotions, until one day I took a teeny tiny step forward, which turned into another step, which turned into another step. And there are days where that place I was in tries to suck me back, and I might step back there for like half a second and remind myself that I don't belong there anymore. But yeah, as I said, in a similar way to we believe that people are an overnight success or something just happens,
Mm.
bravery doesn't just happen.
Mm.
And it can often take a very long time to move away from the place you've been to step
Mm.
into your bravery.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it's really interesting the way that you put it that way, because that's actually sort of the foundation of me starting the podcast, and even like my stuff with business bravery is because like so many people I meet, they're like, oh, bravery, that's just feel the fear and do it anyway. I do that every day. And I was like, well, actually, this is for the people who feel the fear and kind of still can't do it. Like,
Yeah.
when feel the fear and do it anyway doesn't work.
Mm.
And like, this was the point of unearthing these people's stories and everything, because it's like, I want those stories that are the opposite to the overnight success,
Mhm.
because like that's what helps me. And I imagine the people who I attract, they're like me. They've probably had some stuff in their background, although I don't coach on the trauma stuff, because that's not like, I don't want to mess anybody up, or you know what I mean? Like, I'm so
Yeah.
aware, but I'm aware that some like part of the reason why we come into these blocks in business, at least, and in life, is because like we had some stuff in our past that's just, and our body's screaming out, it's like, it's not safe, don't do it. And so like, the for my experience, it's like, my brain and body is, it's like, all I have to do is just message a stranger on the internet, but like everything's going off in my head. Like, it's
Yeah.
worse than worse. And, it's going to be like situations growing up, or,
Mm.
the words, the actions. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Because
yeah.
we're carrying all of that. Like, we don't
Mm.
just show up on a
Yeah.
whatever day it
Mm.
is and go, oh, today's fresh and brand new and I don't carry anything with me. Like, of course, that's how it works. And I
Yeah.
question those. I don't question them to say that they're not telling the truth, but the people that feel the fear and do it anyway, I get those people. But I am going to push back and say there's two kind of reasons why those people exist. One, because they're not very nice and they don't actually care about what actually happens to other people around them. Like, I have so many profanities that are like trying to push out of my mouth. I'm trying not to swear on your podcast. There are people that are not very nice people and they just do stuff because they want to do it and they don't care about the repercussions and they don't care about community or anyone around them and they just do it anyway. Those people are pretty rare because to be that ballsy is not something like we see it in the worst of society. There's those people. The other people that are feeling the fear and doing it anyway, they are practiced. I
Mm.
am one of those people now. I do a lot of stuff that people are like, I can't believe you did that. And I'm like, yeah, well, you know what? I've done some pretty hard stuff. I may as well just keep doing hard stuff, right? But I wasn't always like that. I had a situation just yesterday where I went back to a company who I mean been in discussions with, and I literally just put on the table the biggest ask I could put. And I spoke to the people I'm pitching on behalf of, and they were like, I can't believe you did that. And I was like, well, what's the worst that could happen, right? Like they just say no. And they say no, and I go to my plan B. And if they say no to that, I go to my plan C. And worst case scenario, if we end up at plan D, we pay for the thing and we choose if we still want to do the thing. But wouldn't it be really nice if we got plan A across the line and none of us had to fork out any money for it and they just respected
Mm.
our position in this pitch? And they were
Yeah.
like, yeah, but I can't believe you actually just said that. I was like, well, yeah. But as I said, I'm practiced at this. I do the hard stuff often, so it seems really flippant, but
Mm.
yeah, it takes practice. And at the same time, I'm, you know, I try
Yeah.
not to be one of those other people I referenced where I'm just kind of like burning bridges everywhere I go because they're the other type of people that I probably don't even feel the fear because they're just doing crazy stuff all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting though, because I think like being in business can attract that certain type of person as well, because that certain personality type, yeah, they probably don't enjoy working for others. They want to make their own choices and things like that. And I mean, most of us do in business, but yeah. So I think we can see more of them perhaps in what we do. But yeah,
Mm,
there's always a way to do an ask like, that doesn't burn bridges or something like that necessarily. I mean, you just like in some ways it's like, yeah, like you said, what's the worst that happens? Somebody says no. Well, you're exactly where you are now. You just faced that potential rejection and the feeling having to deal with the feelings of rejection. And for me, often comes with that some like shame and perfectionism and some of that stuff. But yeah. And for others it can be a different range of feelings. But yeah,
mm.
just
Yeah,
that
definitely.
whole that whole asking, like you never know
Yeah,
what
well,
can
and it
happen.
will always be no if you don't put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is, as I said, I'm pitching on behalf of four other people. So I'm pitching a panel idea.
Mm.
And the reaction from the four different people was really interesting. So like one of them was just like, you're an absolute badass and amazing. I was like, okay, cool. And the other was like, cool, no problems. Good luck with that. Let me know how you go. We'll talk plan B, C if that's where we land. But one of them was like, I just don't really like I don't want you to be disappointed. And I just laughed. I'm like, oh no, like I'm not worried about it. And it came from such a place of love and nurturing. And this person is older than me. And so she's like, she's like, you're my little friend. And I'm like, what? And she's like, oh, just because you're younger than me. And like I treat everyone like she's, you know, she probably could be my mum sort of thing. And from an age perspective. So I understand the relationship. And so she was like, oh, like, first of all, she was just baffled that I had done that in the first place. And then she was like, oh, I just hope you're not disappointed. I'm like, nah, if they say no, like whatever. And I said, and hopefully they don't say no on a day that I'm already pissed off, because then I'll just pull the idea and I'll go do it myself and charge people money
Mm.
and then they can miss out on this opportunity altogether. And she's like, why would you do that? I'm like, because I'm really stubborn sometimes. But yeah, I guess it was interesting because it's representing four different people and their reactions of, oh, you did this thing that none of them would have done for all different reasons. So
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I find that really interesting. Like the more the longer I've been hanging out with business owners. And I think like we just, so many of us and the people that I surround myself with, like we would make the ask. So it's like, oh yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Fairly
it's like,
bad.
why?
Oh, hey, like,
You're going to be
yeah.
sitting, as you said, sitting in exactly the same position. So
Mm.
imagine if they actually looked
Yeah.
at it and went, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll put some money behind that. Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for sharing your perspective on bravery and all of that stuff. I'd love to know, like, maybe we can go backwards to you starting your business. I know, or maybe you transitioning into the life coach thing, like, what, from my perspective, I say like brave steps, but sort of like, what things did you have to work through, like maybe objections in your mind or things like that, that you kind of fears or things that you had to overcome in order to do that might be a better way of phrasing the question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, as I said before, I've had three different kind of stints of, or different transition points when it comes to business. The first really big objection for me, or internal dialogue that I had to overcome, was when I first stepped into business. So essentially, I was headhunted and ended up with one of those offers where it was like, you tell us how much you want to make and you tell us how many days a week you want. And I was like, what? I was on maternity leave at the time from paid employment in the same industry. So hence like the headhunting kind of component to it. And I was baffled. And I kept saying to the person I had known for a while who was partnering with a potential investor, I was like, but why me? Like, I don't get it. And I was saying the quiet part out loud because I just couldn't make sense of it. And I was like, I'm not going to add this up in my brain. So I'm just going to say, hey, why me? Because I had never really understood my value. I had been an employee and I had always gone, well, I was such a people pleaser, such a perfectionist, such a hard worker. All of my, like, I now understand trauma so much more than I did when I was in my 20s. So I was like, I get all of those things that made me the best employee in the world because I was just always out to please. But yeah, I couldn't work it out. And I remember who then became my business partner, he just went, because if I want to do this, if I want to get my business like really off the ground, you're the only person I have to compete with. And if you go back to that competitor, I'm screwed. Like I can't do this without you because I can't compete against you. So I'm like, well, if I get you on my side, then I don't have to compete with you. I get you as an asset. And I was baffled because I was like, what do you mean? Like I'm just over there doing my job. And the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, let's just allow this acknowledgement of skill and hard work to land for a little bit. Let's just see what that feels like. And as I stepped into the new role and we grew the business together, so he'd started the business 3 years prior. He was at a pretty significant transition point, knew that he needed to do something to make it grow. There was this window of opportunity because I wasn't in the main competing business, and so because I was on maternity leave, so it's just this perfect window of opportunity to steal me over. Yeah, and within the first 2 years, like we skyrocketed. Like I did all the things that he said that he could see me doing, and I really stepped into that power. I did a lot of really ballsy requests. Like everyone hated me because I had no fear. I don't even know whether I just kind of thought, well, why not? So that was probably the first big transition and real big shift in mindset. And it was hard. Like I was in my early 30s, being a woman of color. I would walk into meetings with CEOs and GMs of some of the largest event companies in the country. And I can't even tell you how many times people would ask me to go make a coffee thinking I was someone's assistant. It was hard. It was really, really hard. And I was really lucky that well, not lucky, I was I think it was a attraction of the right people, but I had really good people around me who would just go, no, if you want someone to make a decision, she's not going to make you a coffee, but she's going to tell you what she wants, and we're not going to do it otherwise. And like, it was really great to have great men around me to support me in that space. But yeah, eventually I had this other idea that sparked for me. So I was working in that business. We had just, I think, close to 5 or 6 full-time staff, but at the peak of the business, we had 200 casual staff. It was not a small feat. I had a young family and was just doing all the things. I was very organized, but I had this idea. I was like, oh, I need a life assistant. I needed someone to do my life admin. I couldn't find anything. The term concierge didn't resonate for me. I didn't even know to search it. It wasn't until I launched my business that I realized there was this industry called concierges. So I was like, oops, that was not in the SEO search terms I was looking for. But I launched this concept of a life assistant. So nearly 7 years ago now, my business, Organized Curate Design, was started as a side hustle on the side of this other business that I was in, which was just silly because I was looking for this service because I was already busy. And it grew legs really quickly. And that was a really brave thing to do, but from the perspective of, I really needed to prove to myself that I could do something myself. So the other business was amazing, but it wasn't mine. I hadn't, one, the concept had already existed. Two, my business partner had started it and had grown it 3 years in. And though I loved it and loved the people and what we did, it wasn't mine. And the more that kind of sunk in, I was like, oh, yeah, it's just not the same. So I created this thing, this idea off the top of my head, and spoke to a few people, and they're like, yeah, I think that could work. And then, yeah, fast forward 7 years later, and it's a thriving business that has serviced hundreds of clients over the years. And the concept of a life assistant is there in the world, and people talk about life admin now, and talk about mental load, and talk about it in a way that's like really easy to understand. And in that business, I did many, many super scary things. Like, I was on Sunrise and the Today Show, and I learned how to do media, and I already had a few I used to be terrified of public speaking. So in the previous business that I mentioned, even just doing briefs to the team, I would go or flush in the face and I couldn't breathe. And then fast forward a couple of years later, and I'm on morning TV and I'm doing keynote talks, and I was like, who the hell is this person? Like, what's going on? Yeah. And so I did that for a little while, and have that business, and then fast forward to 2020, when I decided to start unpacking my trauma, and I disclosed publicly, and then I bravely self-published my memoir 2 years ago. And yeah, and here I am now as a coach. Like, that's the fast forward 12 years in a very quick version. Apologies if you can hear my dog. He doesn't like the postman. He doesn't bark at anyone else. Posties on those like little electronic things, he's just not a fan. So
No, it should be okay. I have some noise cancelling software, so yeah,
yeah, so
a little bit came through, but it's just like teensy stuff. So yeah,
yeah, no, he's always with me, but he's protecting the house from the scary postman.
well, as he should.
But yeah, that was 12 years in a very quick snapshot. But
Yeah.
I guess the key points is that I initially needed someone external to tell me that I had any kind of value and worth, until I really started to find it myself. And then when I found it internally, I was like, oh, this is something I can generate and I can kind of control, and I can decide how much of it I need to get through the next thing, which is such a superpower. Because once I worked out that I didn't need other people to tell me that I was whatever, and I could work that out myself, oh, that's like a whole nother level of superpower that you underestimate until you tap into it. And now yeah, I've got some new business ideas and a few things that are on the horizon, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I was talking to someone recently and I really quickly mentioned a few things and they were like, what? And I'm like, I just said, yeah, I'm going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And like, how do you just do this stuff? I'm like, well, I haven't done it yet, but like, but how do you even, I'm like, because why not? Right. Like, I know I can do that. It might take me a while and I might need to get some funding and whatever, but
Mm.
I know I can do it. And I don't need other people to tell me or give me permission because I know why I do what I do and it comes from a place of purpose. And so that internal voice of, oh my goodness, you're not good enough and blah, blah, blah has been replaced by, it's almost like this internal voice that comes from my very
Mm.
cognitive, practical
Mm.
brain is
Yeah.
now overridden by this internal, rooted from the pit of my stomach voice that goes, nah, you're okay. Let's just grind into this and let's just keep going.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know that switch in myself has been so powerful, and I'm kind of still in the middle because sometimes I still regress a bit into that old voice and I'm like, oh, hang on a minute, that doesn't feel as right as it used to. But yeah, just yeah, how did you make that switch, or like what things did you do to help that along? Or yeah, do you even find now, do you ever regress back a little bit and go, hang on a minute, and yeah.
I definitely do. And it's funny because the switch back is very quick now. When in the past, like I could have wallowed in that self-sabotaging kind of
Yeah.
ego playing games in my head sort of thing. And it would have taken a much longer time. I had a scenario just recently where I had that moment where my brain kicked in and I started just Googling stuff. At one point, I was Googling to the point where I ended up on seek.com. Like, that's not a good idea. I didn't even know what I was looking for because I haven't worked for anyone for 12 years. I don't know if anyone would want to employ me because they'd see the red flag of this person sounds like a pain in the ass. Why would I hire them? They would just question everything I do and tell me I was
Yeah.
doing it wrong. And that's
Yeah.
probably the kind of employee I would end up being. But yeah, like I got so in my head recently that in this mad Googling of, I don't even know what
Mm.
I was initially Googling, that's where I ended up. And what was funny is I ended up just going to bed and the next morning I had a DM on my Instagram from just a random person who had found me through someone else and was just like, oh, I don't know if you work with children as a coach, but I just have some questions about my foster daughter, blah, 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 and just shared a few challenges they were having. And I put I said, I don't work with children. I said, in a community capacity, happy to go for a walk with her and have a chat because you're local. And I can do that in a non-paid capacity just as someone in the community, but I don't have the mechanisms in place at this stage to work with children professionally. And I put her onto a few other resources that I'd kind of heard of. And then a few days later, she wrote back to me again and thanked me for my time and that she'd looked into some of the resources and whatever else. And my gut went, oh, finally, you're listening again. Like, so have you noticed that your brain stopped just rattling around? Like it was just this, and that wasn't me. That was something external that clicked me out of. But my instinct kicked in, and I did all the things I would normally do in this space. I was like, oh yeah, of course I don't need to go find a job on Seek.com because if I had a day job, I wouldn't have been able to help this person. And I
Mm.
wouldn't be able to offer to take that young woman for a walk or whatever. And so what I find now, and I don't know if I've ever had, like I've got a lot of self-care practices that I know just work. They are the really simple ones that everyone knows, but no one wants to do. They are sleep, moving my body, eating
Yeah.
well,
Hmm.
grounding, making sure my feet touch real soil or sand at least every couple of days, being around good people, keeping my circle tight, and
Yeah.
in my case, hanging out with my dog. Like
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
all simple stuff. A lot of that stuff doesn't even cost money. So
Yeah.
it's not hard. And that's the stuff that will bring me back to my inner grounding and knowing and trust, as opposed to being in my head and letting my self-sabotaging voice
Mm.
kick in. But the other thing that I find that's really important is just give yourself a bit of time and grace. So if you are in your head and that's stopping you from making a decision or whatever, just give yourself a little bit of time, because sometimes we rush into saying no or saying yes or doing the thing because our brain's kicked in, when if we just sit with it for a little bit longer, maybe journal on it if that's something that works for you, you can work out pretty quickly, if you tune into your values and what's important to you, what is actually going on, and then ground back into it and work out what to do next.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's definitely been my experience, that self-care checklist that you named and things. And yeah, it sounds so simple and flippant, but at the same time, it makes all the difference. And yeah, like you said, even and then journaling and yeah, getting in touch with that inner knowing, and yeah, just love that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I've got so many more questions that I want to ask, and
I don't even know how we're going for time, but like it's fine.
yeah, I think we've probably got 10 or 15 minutes left. So I know that you want to talk about what's coming up, but I wanted to talk about your book, and I also wanted to talk about like you deciding to delve into and unpacking your trauma. So which direction would you prefer to go in
Well, they
next?
kind of they actually go hand in hand. So I
Okay. Yeah.
let's try. I will try to answer two questions in one. Unpacking my trauma. When I decided in 2020 to disclose to family members, key family members, that was the beginning of the unpacking of my trauma. And for me, that formed a really important part of the process. So I knew I needed to start with the people closest to me and undo some of the systems that I was in that I no longer wanted to be in. And I talk about, like, obviously I'm answering this in a very fast way. It was a very long process and it's an ongoing
Mm.
process.
Yeah.
But in doing that, funnily enough, I had so because I have the other business, and as I said, I've done media and PR and all that
Mm.
sort of stuff. So the first thing I did when I decided I was going to have this conversation initially with family was I called my publicist, which is so weird, but made so much sense.
Yeah,
And
I kind of get it. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, can I come and meet you? Like, I didn't often go see her in person, but I'm like, I need to meet you in person. She probably thought, oh God, PR crisis. What's Caroline done? So I met with her and I shared my story, and I said, I'm really worried that after what was a whole year of working in 2019, what was a whole year of working really hard on getting my business just everywhere I could get it. I'm like, I don't want to undo all that hard work. And she's like, these are two very separate things. And the media that may pick this up, if that's where you end up, are not the media that are going to, like, people won't even realize it's the same person, let alone, like, that's just not how the
Mm.
media works. And in addition to that, you're coming at this from a place of integrity, and you are the victim survivor. Like, you're not a perpetrator, not having to damage control from that perspective. And so she was really supportive and had some really just helped me put things into perspective. But what she did say to me at the time was like, but once you do the family side and you go through counseling or whatever you want to do, what are you going to do next? Like, what's your plan? And she's like, is it a podcast? Is it are you going to start a charity? What are you going to do? And all of those ideas, I was like, oh, I don't think so. And I said, I think I'm going to write a book. And she's like, okay, that makes sense. And at that point, like, I'd done some writing, like, from a website and blog perspective and whatever. I'd never written a book. So I was like, I think I'm going to write my memoir, but I'm not sure. But I'm going to start just noting things down during this process. And then I'm just going to see where I land with that. So funnily enough, by 2021, was already starting to put together my book, and I worked with a writing coach. And even when I met with my writing coach, I was like, I'm going to write this book, but I don't know if I'm going to publish it. And she just grinned and went, okay, cool. Just knowing me as, like, the bit, like, because we'd known each other through the business world, and just like spending a small amount of time with me, she was like, have you met you? Like, you don't do stuff and then not do anything with it. Like, okay, then. So she was very lovely, but probably had this look on her face like, of course you're going to end up doing something with this book. I wrote the first version in like 3 months. Done. Just poured out of me. I had a lot of things to refer back to. So I had a lot of ideas of what I wanted to put in it. Obviously, it's my own lived experience. So I obviously had the content as such. But my memoir is part memoir, part research. So I refer to research about intergenerational trauma. I refer to research about DNA and epigenetics and the way that trauma changes our DNA, not the core structure of it, but how it impacts us in that way. I refer to how, as human beings, we have always had in our history the concept of sacrificial, the way we sacrifice people, and how in certain cultures, like certain people were sacrificed to the gods, and be it young women were sacrificed and thrown off cliffs, or bodies were sacrificed and their bones laid to out in the sun to sacrifice to the god of the sun, or like just all these concepts that underpin us as a humanity, underpin our humanity, and then underpin how that shows up in day-to-day society, and therefore how it showed up for me. So it's not and then on this day this happened, and then like it's just not that kind of book. So I wrote it really quick. First draft was really quick. I'm really glad my writing coach didn't tell me that there would be at least 2 more drafts, because I would have gone, no, I'm not doing that more than once. Like, that's a terrible.
Because writing is rewriting.
Writing is rewriting and rewriting again. If they tell you otherwise, they're lying to get you to start. Once you start, you can't stop. But no, so I did draft 2, draft 3, whatever else, and self-published. So I spoke to a few publishers, and at one point I was going to try and work with a agent to try and find me a publishing house, and it was in the pandemic as well, so it wasn't necessarily the best time to be doing that. Like, that was a tricky time to be doing anything really, but I was adamant this was my story, and I was like, I'm going to work with an editor. So I had a writing coach, I had a designer typeface person, I had a company that essentially helps people self-publish, so they were just an overall project manager, and then I had an independent editor. So I was like, I've got the team that would have been provided through a publishing house, but I've picked my team. They know that I have final say, but I also trust them to do their job. So yeah, so I just didn't really want anyone taking something out going, oh, this isn't really relevant, or can you tell us more about this? So there's nothing graphic in my memoir. It doesn't go into graphic detail. I'm really mindful of not further traumatizing trauma survivors. So I know that there's a place for that kind of information, but it just wasn't going to be the right fit for me. So yeah, so self-published in 2022 and did the audio version at the same time. So I narrate the audio version, which is like surreal. I've had a few people that are like, I was listening to your book on the beach, and I was like, why would you do that to yourself? Like, why would you? Like, that's weird. Don't cry at the beach. Like, sorry. I've had some lovely messages, or someone that's like, I'm going to go on a flight and I'm going to listen to your book. I'm like, don't do that. I always warn people, I'm like, that's not a good idea. Like, it's not easy listening on your way to Hawaii. Like, don't do that. But yeah, it's been a pretty amazing experience, and I think having the power of having my own copies, like, people can purchase it through like Amazon and whatever, which is a print on demand type service, so they just print you one copy. It takes a little bit longer to get it if they go through that route, but because I have my own copies, it means I can like give books away, and I can share them with communities, and I can just do that, which is really nice, because that was the purpose of the book. It was to get things out of my own brain and my own heart, but also to give survivors a resource that I needed. I needed to hear stories like mine as an incest survivor. And yeah, there aren't enough of our stories out there, but there are many, many of us as survivors.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine, I guess because earlier you'd gone through the talking to family, the like would you have had much of the, oh, what if a family member reads this or they think a different side? Like, yeah. My
Yeah,
experience is
and
that
don't
the
get me
person
wrong.
on the side has a completely different story about what happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
and don't get me wrong, like I was very mindful of that. Like when I released my book, I was waiting for someone to pick up the phone and call me and tell me off, or to tell me that I needed to take it off the shelves. Not that it's on the shelves, but you know what I mean. Like that, all of that stuff, I was waiting for that and didn't really come because yeah, I don't know. I think the other part that like Google is a fantastic place for finding people's names. Like it wouldn't be very hard for people to work out who my family members are and who people are in this story. But I don't actually use any names. So other than my name on the cover, like my husband is
Yeah.
referred to as my husband and my
Mm.
children are referred to as my children. Like no one's names are in
Mm.
there. And so there were a few mechanisms like that, just they're quite subtle, but I've put them in on purpose because my intention has always been to create space for others to share and to have people see themselves or parts of themselves in my story so they can make more sense of their own story. It was never to cause more harm.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Mm. Wow. Sorry, I know like the bravery term seems flippant, but from my perspective, like yeah, I hope something powerful is like this in my future. And just having seen you take the steps and put the book out there and tell your story and help others, like it really inspires me and has been inspiring me since I came across your work and everything. And just yeah, yeah, really appreciate that, the steps you took, the courage. I like the term bravery, but yeah, do you know what I
Oh,
mean?
and
Like,
as
yeah,
I said, I understand the word. Hence why I shared all those theories with you because I know that I am brave. Like I get that, and I know
yeah,
that even from a we're talking to business people right now. That's the
mm,
predominant people.
yeah,
When you do the math on self-publishing your own memoir and having a writing coach and a whole team of people, that costs money, right? Like I I had days where I was like, what? Why? Like I could put this money towards so many other things. And my husband said to me, he was like, what's the point, right? Yeah, we could go on a holiday or we could do this, or we could do that, but this is going to be your legacy. This is going to be the thing you put into the world that people will remember you for forever. And it may just be a handful of people that you have an impact on, but those handful of people needed that. And so if that means that us investing this money in this project and self-publishing and printing copies and whatever, then that's our thing. Like that's what we've put into the world. And how, like, what's the point in making money and doing things if you're not investing in yourself and the things that are important to you? So yeah, there's like a lot of elements of that bravery and courage, even
mm,
from a bottom line perspective, because when you're
yeah,
passionate about anything
mm,
and you're courageous enough to really give it a go, you've got to give it a go in lots of different ways. Like you've got to show up and do the thing and then keep talking about the thing, even though you talked about it yesterday, because no one pays attention and people's attention spans are so short. Like I say the same thing every day. But at the same time, you've got to put your money where your mouth is, and that's hard.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, so true, isn't it? The whole you're saying the same thing every day, but you have to, and oh yeah,
Every day. And I'm like, yeah, because I had
like
someone,
all of
they're
us,
like, I
yeah.
didn't know you were a life coach. I'm like, mate, come on. Are you serious? Like,
Yeah.
it's all I talk about. And they're like, oh, I didn't know. I'm like, oh. And I understand, like, from a social media perspective, like the algorithm only shows people a certain amount of things, like maybe 3% of the things. But
Yeah.
yeah, when you're the person creating the thing and you're saying the same thing over and over again, and you feel like you're repeating yourself, and you're like, surely people don't want me to keep talking about this. And they're like, no, because they didn't hear it the first time. So you got to say,
Yeah. Oh gosh. Actually, it's funny because that's the times for me in the past, and then many of my past clients, that's the time when we want to pivot because it's like, surely everybody's bored about this. They've all heard it. This,
Yeah,
because
no. If you're that is such a good reminder. If you're at a
yeah,
point, that is your brain going, it's not working. Move
yeah,
on. And your gut goes, just give it some more time. And
yeah,
that's when that next client will come through or something. And you're like, oh, especially when the new client comes in and they're like, I've never heard of this before. And you're like, oh my God, I've been talking about this for years.
yeah.
Because people don't look for the things they don't need, right? And so, be it that in my case, they're a trauma survivor and they, haven't been ready to work on this part of themselves or whatever the case, or you sell really cute monochrome stationery and they've never really needed that. And then one day they want to buy it and they Google it and they're like, oh, I didn't realize your business has been around for 5 years. I'm like, yeah, well, you didn't need me until now. So
Yeah,
yeah, there's always an audience there and there's always people that need you, but they need you when they need you, not because they've
yeah.
been paying attention for years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So good. So what things do you have coming up in the future, in the next 3 to 6 months? Brave things or just new things? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So new things that are definitely coming
Mm,
around the corner so we're in kind of mid-June at the moment when we're recording. I'm going to say by the end of June, you'll be able to see some breathwork offerings with me initially in person. So I'm based on the Gold Coast. As it's a new offering, it's going to be something that I'm doing in person first. I will be rolling it out online though. So I'll be creating some packages where people can do a series of 6 sessions. The majority of those will be online, but then there'll be an option to do a longer one in person if they want to do that and they're located in Queensland, or I can do them interstate because I do travel a lot, so we can kind of tee things up, which is pretty special. So that's an offering that's
mm,
almost ready to launch, which is very exciting. And then the other thing that I'm going to be doing, and you're getting an exclusive because I haven't said this out loud to anyone, so that's pretty exciting. Well, I have said it out loud, but nothing in a public way. I am working on what will be, I say this and I kind of cringe, my fourth business. Oh, I'm tired just thinking about
no,
it.
don't cringe, don't cringe. Oh my God.
It's exciting, but I'm like, oh, business is hard. My fourth business, which will be a peer support organization for incest and child sexual abuse survivors, predominantly for them. It will be open to anyone that wants to be in the space as a survivor of sexual violence. But there is we all know in business, you need to niche down and you need to know who you're talking to. And I know who I need to talk to. So my the the key audience that I will be supporting are incest survivors and child sexual abuse survivors. What I am looking to create is a peer support space that is purely based on peer support. So though there may be times where we invite people with a clinical background or a pathology background or whatever else into the space to maybe run workshops or to be on hand for referrals, the majority of the groups and events that I will be hosting are purely for peer support. So breathwork will be the first thing that we offer. There'll be group meetups. And then there'll just be normal things that people can do. So it might be like a paint by numbers or a activity or a something that people can do in community with other survivors where they don't actually need to talk about trauma at all, but they know
Mm,
that they are in a space where if they create a bond or trust and they make some new friends and they know that the people around them get it and that there are mechanisms in place if they need to be referred to another service or want to work with me as a coach or need
mm,
other things as we build our kind of support network around this particular community. The reason I want to build this is I have over the last few years found my own peer support group online. I mean, when you work in the space and especially when you speak at events and do podcasts and things, people reach out and kind of create this online community. A lot of us, we haven't even met in person, but when we're doing hard things, we reach out to each other. And I have noticed when I share that I'm going to do something or whatever else, the people that show up in my messages are the people that are survivors. So there's a real power there, and a real power to have a space that actually isn't about fixing us or pathologizing us or anything like that. It's just about community and connection. So yeah, peer support organization purely to connect and have space in community.
Wow. Is that something that you'd be running as like a non-profit and getting like donations and things, or if you don't mind me
Um,
asking?
I think I'm probably leaning more towards the social enterprise model where it's for
Okay.
profit but for purpose. So essentially, straight back in, we can seek funding if we need to, but I don't think I'll be going down the route of a not-for-profit or a charity simply because of the complexities of that. And it
Yeah.
it can be a really complicated system. And I understand why there needs to be real governance around not-for-profit organizations. But I think with my business background, being able to align with corporates and have them put their money back into the community to know that they're funding space where we can host to have yoga with puppies or something like that, and someone can pay for that and people can come along and they don't have to pay, like, you know, the participants don't have to pay. They get to have this really beautiful somatic experience with their peers and know that someone's funding that. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm leaning towards, a social enterprise model as opposed to
Yeah.
not-for-profit based model. But
Yeah.
yeah, still very early in the works. I'm
Mm.
in discussions with, like, from a branding perspective, first of July comes along, you know, registering names and all that sort of stuff will happen. It's very early days, hence why I haven't even said the name, because I need to make sure I register it before I say it publicly. But it's very exciting, and it's something that my coaching will always exist, and the breathwork and other things that sit inside of that. But this space will be for the people by the people. It's not actually the Caroline show at all. It will have its own name. I hope one day to not be at every event, to have men's groups and spaces for male survivors, mixed sessions where survivors can just show up as they are, where it isn't with a gendered lens. There's so many other things that I want to do that I know that I'm not going to be the best person to hold those spaces. So creating something that is for the community and for survivors.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, just the power of that, of like being able to help people while they're in it. And then like you also help people, unpack it years later, decades later. Just, yeah, I can definitely see the power and the impact and all of that stuff that you're having on the world. So thank you so much for all of your time today. It's been amazing. I typically have 100 more questions, but I know that we're running out of time, so I won't do that. I will just sort of ask for people who are listening. We'll of course have links to all of your good stuff in the show notes. But for people who are like me, who are like, screw the show notes, I just want to go Google it now or get on Instagram now, where can people find you, or where's the best place for people to connect with you or find your book?
Yeah, definitely. So my website, which is carolinebrunne.com, which is where you'll find everything, and also links to socials, links to my book. So if you purchase my book through my website, you get a signed hard copy, but the links to all those bigger distributors are there as well. I would say my most active social media platform is Instagram. So it's Caroline_Brunne. That's where you'll see kind of anything I'm sharing, new offerings. It's definitely where announcements of the new business will be launched once that's ready, which is very exciting. And then that will kind of eventually have its own home and whatever else, but it will initially sit under my umbrella until it grows some legs and does its thing. But yeah, I'm not that hard to find. You probably, if you Google me, you'll find lots of different things because, as I said, I've done lots of different things over the last few years, but most people can find this trauma survivor work pretty quickly if that resonates. I have a 3-month and a 6-month coaching series that I offer. But when I launch my breathwork in a few weeks, I'll also be launching a one-off coaching call as well, which I haven't really done before. So it will be a one-off call for anyone that kind of either can't commit to a 3-month series or is looking for something a little bit more economical as a one-off. So yeah, some new things coming on the horizon.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for all of your amazing inspiration, your stories today. It's definitely going to be inspiring me for days and weeks to come. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Business Bravery podcast. Has this episode inspired you to do something brave? Even if it's only send a difficult email, please share it with me on Instagram or other social media channels. Feel free to tag me at Tiffany G Studios. That's TIFFANY. G for golf, STUDIOS, no spaces, no underscores, etc. Or you can use the hashtag Business Bravery Podcast so that I can cheer you on and together we can inspire other coaches and course creators to do brave things in their business and life. Now, I'm Tiffany and I'll leave you with this one last thing. What's one brave thing you're going to do today? It doesn't have to be big. Even the smallest steps can create the most massive results. So again, feel free to share it with me either publicly or privately so that I can cheer you on. That's it from me. Until next time, bye for now.